The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the Red Cloud trading post, and Julia Dawson emerged with nothing but a threadbare carpetbag. Two frightened 4-year-old boys clutching her skirts, and exactly 17 cents to her name. The Nebraska dust settled around her worn boots as she surveyed the ramshackle buildings lining the single street of this frontier settlement in 1878. Her husband had died 3 months ago from pneumonia back in Pennsylvania, leaving her with debts she could never pay and creditors who had taken everything except her children. The only thing Robert had given her before death claimed him was a name scrawled on paper, his brother Samuel, supposedly running a general store in Red Cloud. She had sold her wedding ring for the stagecoach fare west, praying that family would help where strangers had turned their backs. "Mama, I'm thirsty," Samuel whispered, named after the uncle they had never met. "Me too," echoed Thomas, his twin brother. Julia smoothed their dark hair and forced a smile despite the knot of fear tightening in her stomach. "We will find Uncle Samuel and everything will be fine." The trading post looked deserted. She gathered her courage and pushed through the door, a small bell announcing their arrival. The interior was dim and smelled of leather and tobacco. Empty shelves lined the walls, and dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through grimy windows. "Hello." Her voice sounded small in the empty space. An elderly man emerged from a back room, wiping his hands on a dirty apron. His eyes were rheumy and suspicious. "We are closed. New owner ain't decided what to do with the place yet." Julia's heart sank. "I am looking for Samuel Dawson." "This is his store, is it not?" The old man's expression softened slightly. "Samuel Dawson died 6 weeks back. Heart gave out. You family." The world tilted beneath Julia's feet. Her last hope, her only plan, crumbled to nothing. She gripped the boy's hands tighter, fighting the urge to sink to the floor and weep. "I am his brother's widow. We came from Pennsylvania. I had nowhere else to go. Lord have mercy." The old man shook his head. "Samuel never married, had no children. The bank took the store for unpaid debts. I'm just here keeping an eye on things until they sell it off." Julia felt the boys pressing against her legs, sensing her distress. She straightened her spine. She had not survived 3 months of hell and a week on a stagecoach to fall apart now. "Is there work in this town?" "A boarding house that might extend credit until I can pay." The old man scratched his stubbled chin. "Might try asking at the Double C Ranch, few miles north of town. Tanner Calloway owns most of the land around these parts. Sometimes takes on help, though I ain't sure about a woman with young ones." "I can work," Julia said firmly. "I can cook, clean, sew, tend animals. I am not afraid of hard labor. The walk is long, especially with little ones. You got money for a horse?" Julia thought of the 17 cents in her pocket. "No." The old man sighed deeply. "Wait here." He disappeared into the back room and returned with a canteen of water and a small cloth bundle. "Got some biscuits and jerky. It ain't much, but it will keep you from starving on the walk. Follow the north road until you see the painted fence posts. That is Calloway land. Main house is about another mile past that." Tears pricked Julia's eyes at this unexpected kindness. "Thank you. I will repay you someday. Just take care of them boys. This country is hard on women alone." The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as Julia trudged along the rutted road, a boy's hand in each of hers. Her feet ached in her thin boots, and sweat plastered her dress to her back. The boys complained less than she expected, though their small faces were red from heat and exertion. She stopped periodically to share sips from the canteen, rationing the water carefully. They had been walking for over an hour when she spotted the painted fence posts, white against the golden grassland. Relief flooded through her. giving her tired legs renewed strength. The main house appeared in the distance, a sprawling structure of timber and stone that spoke of prosperity. As they approached, Julia noticed several outbuildings, a large barn and corrals filled with horses. Men moved about performing various tasks, their voices carrying across the yard. She felt suddenly aware of her bedraggled appearance, the dust coating her mourning dress, the wild state of her hair falling from its pins. A tall figure emerged from the barn, leading a magnificent chestnut stallion. Even from a distance, Julia could see he was younger than she expected, perhaps in his late 20s. He wore dusty work clothes and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. As they drew closer, he stopped and watched their approach with obvious curiosity. Julia halted a respectful distance away, acutely conscious of the picture they must present, a desperate woman and two exhausted children appearing like beggars at his gate. "Sir, I am looking for Tanner Calloway." The man tied the stallion to a post and turned to face them fully. He had striking features, weathered by sun and wind, with intelligent gray eyes that took in every detail of their situation. "You found him. What can I do for you? I am Julia Dawson. These are my sons, Samuel and Thomas. I arrived in Red Cloud today seeking my late husband's brother, but I learned he recently passed. I have no money and nowhere to go. The man at the trading post suggested you might have work available. I can earn my keep in any capacity you require, and the boys are well behaved." They would not be trouble. Tanner Calloway removed his hat, revealing dark hair dampened with sweat. His expression was unreadable as he studied them. "You walked from town in this heat?" "Yes, sir, with 2 small children and no provisions. An old man at the trading post gave us water and some food." Tanner shook his head slowly, and Julia felt her last hope beginning to slip away. Then he called out, "Miguel, come take Copper back to his stall." A young ranch hand appeared and took the stallion's reins. Tanner gestured toward the house. "Come inside before you all get sunstroke. We can discuss this properly." The interior of the house was surprisingly comfortable, with sturdy furniture and clean floors. Tanner directed them to a large kitchen where a pot-bellied stove radiated warmth despite the summer heat. He pumped water into a basin and handed Julia a clean cloth. "Wash the dust off the boys' faces. I will get some cold milk from the spring house." Julia obeyed, gently cleaning Samuel and Thomas while they stared around the kitchen with wide eyes. When Tanner returned, he poured 3 glasses of milk and set them before the children along with a plate of sugar cookies from a tin. "Eat slowly," Julia cautioned the twins, who attacked the unexpected treats with enthusiasm. Tanner leaned against the counter, arms crossed, studying her with those penetrating gray eyes. "Your husband died recently, 3 months ago. Pneumonia took him in April. I am sorry. That is a hard thing, especially with young children. Thank you." Julia folded the cloth carefully, needing something to do with her hands. "I know appearing at your door like this is presumptuous, but I am a hard worker, sir. I kept house for my husband and his parents. I can cook for large groups, I know my numbers and letters, and I am not squeamish about butchering or any other unpleasant tasks." "How old are you, Mrs. Dawson?" 23, sir." Tanner nodded slowly. "I am 28. I run this ranch with about a dozen permanent hands and hire extra help during cattle drives. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, is getting on in years and has been asking for assistance. I could use someone to help with cooking and washing for the men, tending the kitchen garden, and other household tasks. The work would be hard and the hours long." Julia's heart leaped with hope. "I am not afraid of hard work. The position would include a room in the house, meals, and $10 a month. There is a small bedroom off the kitchen that should accommodate you and your boys." $10 a month was not generous, but it was survival. Julia blinked back tears of relief. When would you like me to start? Tomorrow morning is soon enough. Today you should rest and get settled. He pushed away from the counter. Let me show you the room. The bedroom was indeed small, barely large enough for the narrow bed and dresser it contained, but to Julia it looked like paradise. A window overlooked the kitchen garden, and the space was clean and dry. Mrs. Chen sleeps in the room at the end of the hall upstairs, Tanner explained. You will meet her at supper. There is a wash house behind the main building where you can do laundry. Privy is out back. The men eat in the bunkhouse, but the house staff takes meals in the kitchen. Thank you, Mr. Calloway. You have saved our lives. He looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. You have not started working yet. Save your thanks until you see what you have gotten yourself into. That evening, Julia met Mrs. Chen, a tiny Chinese woman who must have been in her 70s but moved with surprising energy. Her face creased into a warm smile when she saw the twins. Oh, how wonderful! Little ones bring good fortune to a house. You call me Lin. Mrs. Chen makes me feel ancient. Julia liked her immediately. They prepared supper together while Lin chattered away, explaining the household routines and Tanner's preferences. The rancher liked his coffee strong, his meals substantial, and apparently worked from before dawn until well after dark managing his extensive property. He is a good man, Lin said, kneading dough for biscuits. Bought this land 5 years ago when it was nothing but grass and dreams. Built it all himself, works harder than any 3 men combined. Is he married? Julia asked, then immediately felt her cheeks warm. I only ask because I have not seen a Mrs. Calloway. Lin shook her head. No wife. No sweetheart either, though plenty of women in town have tried. He says he is married to this ranch. She paused, giving Julia a meaningful look. Though I think he is just waiting for the right woman. A man gets lonely out here. Julia busied herself stirring the pot of stew, unwilling to examine why that information made her pulse quicken. She was a widow, still in mourning, with 2 young sons and no prospects. The last thing she should be thinking about was her employer's marital status. Tanner joined them for supper, along with his foreman, a grizzled man named Pete who had kind eyes and calloused hands. The twins were so tired they could barely keep their eyes open, but they minded their manners and earned approving nods from the men. After the meal, Julia tucked the boys into the narrow bed, lying down beside them in her chemise. They fell asleep instantly, small bodies curled against hers. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling for the night. For the first time since Robert's death, she felt something other than despair. Not quite hope, perhaps, but at least the possibility of survival. She woke before dawn to the sound of roosters crowing and men's voices in the yard. Dressing quickly in the same worn dress from yesterday, she braided her hair and slipped into the kitchen. Lin was already there, building up the fire in the stove. You sleep well? The older woman asked. Better than I have in months. What can I do to help? Lin's smile widened. I knew I would like you. Start with the coffee. Tanner will be in soon, and he is unbearable without his morning cup. They fell into an easy rhythm, preparing a breakfast of eggs, bacon, biscuits, and gravy. The twins woke and crept into the kitchen, still shy in these new surroundings. Lin immediately put them to work setting the table, praising their efforts extravagantly. Tanner appeared just as the sun broke over the horizon, bringing with him the smell of horses and leather. His hair was damp as though he had dunked his head in the water trough, and his jaw showed dark stubble. Morning, he said, heading straight for the coffee pot. He poured a cup and drank half of it before seeming to fully wake. His eyes found Julia. How did you sleep? Very well, thank you. The boys settle in all right. They did. Thank you for asking. He nodded and took another long drink of coffee. Lynn began dishing up breakfast, and they all sat around the large kitchen table. Julia found herself acutely aware of Tanner's presence, the way his long fingers wrapped around the coffee cup, the deep timbre of his voice when he spoke to the boys. "You two ever been around horses?" he asked Samuel and Thomas. They shook their heads in unison. "No, sir," Samuel said quietly. "Well, that will have to change. Cannot grow up on a ranch and not know horses. When you finish eating, I will introduce you to the gentlest mare we have. Her name is Daisy, and she loves children." The boys' faces lit up with excitement. Julia felt a rush of warmth toward this man who had taken in 3 strangers and was already finding ways to make her sons feel welcome. After breakfast, Tanner was true to his word. He led the twins to the barn while Julia and Lynn tackled the morning dishes. Through the kitchen window, Julia watched as Tanner lifted each boy and turned to pet the old mare's nose. His patience with them was evident in every gesture. "He will make a good father someday," Lynn observed, following Julia's gaze. "He is gentle with all young things, animals and children alike." Julia felt heat rise in her cheeks and turned away from the window. The boys need that. Their own father was not unkind, but he was not demonstrative either. "You did not love your husband." The question was blunt but not unkind. Julia considered her answer carefully. "I respected Robert. We had an arranged match of sorts. Our families thought we suited. He was 15 years older than me, steady and responsible. But love," she shook her head. "I do not think either of us expected that." "You are young yet," Lynn said. "Too young to be alone the rest of your life." "I have the boys to think of. They must come first." "Why cannot you think of all 3 of you? A good man would be father to them and husband to you." Julia had no answer to that, so she changed the subject by asking about the garden duties. Lynn accepted the deflection with a knowing smile that made Julia feel transparent. The days fell into a demanding but satisfying rhythm. Julia rose before dawn to help prepare breakfast for the ranch hands, though they ate in the bunkhouse. She spent her mornings tending the extensive kitchen garden, her afternoons helping Lynn with cooking and household tasks, and her evenings mending clothes or preserving food. The twins played in the yard under the watchful eyes of the ranch hands, who adopted them as unofficial mascots. Tanner was a constant presence, though he worked such long hours they rarely had time for conversation. Still, Julia found herself watching for him, noticing small details. The way he removed his hat when entering the house, his habit of checking on the boys whenever he passed through the yard, the rare smile that transformed his serious face into something almost boyish. 2 weeks after her arrival, she was hanging laundry in the morning sunshine when Tanner rode up on Copper. He dismounted in one fluid motion and walked over to where she stood with a basket of wet sheets. "Mrs. Dawson, I wanted to discuss something with you." Julia's hand stilled on the clothesline. Had she done something wrong? "Of course. I have been watching how you handle the boys and how they have adjusted to ranch life. They are good children, well-mannered and willing to learn." "Thank you. I try to raise them properly." Tanner shifted his weight, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "The thing is, growing up on a ranch without a father is going to be hard for them. They need a man's guidance, someone to teach them skills and give them direction." Julia's stomach clenched. Was he asking her to leave? "I understand if you think the situation is not working out." "No, that is not what I mean at all." He removed his hat and turned it in his hands. "You are an excellent worker, and Lynn says you have made her job considerably easier. What I am trying to say, though I am making a mess of it, is that I think those boys need a father, and I am willing to be that man." Julia stared at him, certain she had misheard. "I do not understand." "I am asking you to marry me, Mrs. Dawson." "Julia." Her name sounded strange and wonderful in his deep voice. "I know it is sudden, and we barely know each other, but I run a ranch that needs a woman's touch, and you need security for yourself and your sons. More importantly, Samuel and Thomas need a stable home with two parents. It would be a practical arrangement, beneficial to both of us." A practical arrangement. Julia felt an unexpected stab of disappointment even as her practical side recognized the wisdom of his proposal. "You do not love me. I respect you," Tanner said carefully. "I admire your strength and how you care for your children. I think we could build something good together, given time. Love can grow from respect and partnership. And if it does not, then we would still have a functional household and two boys with both a mother and father. That is more than many marriages have." Julia turned back to the laundry, needing to hide her face while she processed this unexpected turn. Her mind raced through the implications. Marriage to Tanner would give her and the boys permanent security. The twins clearly adored him already. He was hardworking, fair, and kind. Many women married for far less, but she had already had one loveless marriage. The thought of entering another, of sharing a man's bed without passion or deep affection, made her heart ache with loneliness even before it began. "What would you expect from such a marriage?" she asked quietly. "I would expect a true marriage," Tanner said. "A wife to run my household, share my table, and eventually my bed. In return, I would provide for you and the boys, protect you, and treat your sons as my own. I would not be a harsh husband, Julia. I would try to make you happy." She turned to face him, studying his serious expression. "Why now? Why me?" "Because I see how hard you work and how much you love your children. Because I am tired of coming home to an empty house. Because those boys look at me like I hung the moon and I find I want to deserve that look. Because when I imagine my future now, I see you in it." Julia's breath caught. It was not a declaration of love, but it was honest and more than she had expected. "May I have time to think about it?" "Of course. This is not a decision to make lightly." He settled his hat back on his head. "But do not take too long. Once the fall cattle drive starts, I will be gone for weeks. I would like this settled before then." That evening, Julia sought Lynn's advice while they prepared supper. The older woman listened carefully to everything Tanner had said, nodding thoughtfully. "He is offering you everything you need," Lynn said finally. "But you want what you need and what your heart wants. Am I right? Is that foolish? No, child. But love is not always a lightning strike. Sometimes it is a seed that grows slowly. Tanner is a good man. He would never mistreat you. Give him a chance and give yourself permission to see what might develop. I barely know him." "Then get to know him before you answer. He is not asking you to decide tonight." Julia took that advice to heart. Over the next week, she made opportunities to talk with Tanner beyond their usual brief exchanges. She asked about his plans for the ranch, his past, his dreams for the future. He had grown up in Texas, the youngest son of a cattle rancher who had divided his land among Julia's older brothers, leaving Tanner to make his own way. He had come to Nebraska with nothing but a good horse and determination, working as a ranch hand until he saved enough to buy his first 100 acres. "I want to build something lasting," he told her one evening as they stood watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. The twins were playing near the barn under Pete's supervision. "Something I can pass down to my sons someday, a legacy. You want children. I want a family." He glanced at her, his gray eyes warm in the fading light. "I am almost 30, Julia. Most men my age already have wives and children. I waited because I was building this place, because I wanted to have something to offer a woman. But now I have the ranch, and I realize a ranch is not much good without people to share it with." "The boys would be blessed to have you as a father," Julia said softly. They have never had a man pay them such attention. They are easy to love. Tanner's voice grew quieter. Their mother is not hard to care for either. Julia's heart skipped. Before she could respond, Samuel came running up, excited about a new calf born that afternoon. The moment passed, but it lingered in Julia's mind as she lay in bed that night. She thought about Robert, her first husband. He had been a good provider but emotionally distant, treating their marriage as a business arrangement. She had never felt cherished or truly seen by him. Tanner looked at her differently, as though she mattered beyond her domestic capabilities. When he spoke to her, he listened to her answers with genuine interest. When she smiled, his own expression softened in response. Maybe Lynn was right. Maybe love could grow from this foundation of respect and partnership. The next morning, Julia found Tanner in the barn checking on the new calf. Her heart hammered as she approached him, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "I have considered your proposal." Tanner straightened immediately, his full attention on her. "And I will marry you on one condition." "Name it." "That we both enter this marriage willing to try for more than just a practical arrangement. I do not expect you to love me now, but I want us both to leave room for the possibility. I do not want another marriage of mere convenience." Tanner closed the distance between them in 3 long strides. He took her hands in his, and the warmth of his touch sent tingles up her arms. "Julia, I would not have asked if I did not believe we could build something real. I promise you, I will do everything in my power to make you happy and to earn your affection. Then yes, I will marry you." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise, chasing away shadows she had not even realized were there. He raised her hands to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a gesture so unexpectedly tender that tears sprang to her eyes. "You have made me very happy," he said. "We will go to town tomorrow and speak to Reverend Matthews. I would like to marry as soon as possible if that suits you." "What will people think? I have only been here 3 weeks. Let them think what they want. I know the truth, and so do you. We are 2 people making a sensible decision for good reasons. That is no one's business but ours." They married 4 days later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Red Cloud. Julia wore her best dress, a dark blue cotton that Lynn had helped her alter to fit better. The older woman had also fashioned a small bouquet from garden flowers. Pete stood up as Tanner's witness, and Lynn held the twins' hands during the brief ceremony. When Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, Tanner kissed her with such gentle reverence that Julia felt her eyes fill with tears. Whatever this marriage might become, it was already more than her first had ever been. They held a small celebration at the ranch that evening. The ranch hands had prepared a feast, and someone produced a fiddle. To Julia's surprise, Tanner was an excellent dancer. He swept her around the yard in the twilight while the men clapped and the twins laughed with delight. "Where did a Texas rancher learn to waltz?" she asked, breathless and smiling. "My mother insisted all her sons learn the social graces. She said civilization would come to the frontier eventually, and we should be ready for it. Remind me to thank her if I ever meet her." Tanner's expression grew sad. "She passed 5 years ago. But she would have liked you. She always said I needed a woman with backbone. I am sorry for your loss. She lived a good life and died surrounded by family. That is all anyone can ask." He spun her in a wide circle, making her skirts bell out. "Tonight is for happiness, not sad memories." As the evening wore on and the twins grew tired, Lynn shepherded them off to bed. The ranch hands gradually dispersed to the bunkhouse, leaving Julia and Tanner alone in the yard. The stars were beginning to emerge, countless points of light in the vast Nebraska sky. "Are you nervous?" Tanner asked quietly. Julia was honest. "Yes, so am I." He took her hand. "We can take this as slowly as you need. I meant what I said about trying to make you happy. That includes being patient." They walked into the house together. Tanner had spent the previous days moving his belongings from his small bedroom to the larger master bedroom, which would now be theirs. Julia had barely seen it before, but now she noticed the care he had taken. Fresh linens on the large bed, wildflowers in a vase on the dresser. The room was clean and welcoming. "I will give you privacy to prepare for bed," Tanner said, backing toward the door. "Wait." Julia caught his hand. "Could you just hold me for a moment?" He pulled her into his arms immediately, and Julia pressed her face against his chest. She could hear his heart beating steadily beneath her ear. His hands rubbed gentle circles on her back. "I know this is not the wedding night you probably imagined as a girl," he murmured. "Nothing in my life has gone as I imagined," Julia admitted. "But this feels right. You feel right." Tanner tilted her face up and kissed her slowly, thoroughly, until Julia forgot to be nervous and simply let herself feel. When they finally parted, both were breathing hard. "I should let you change," Tanner said roughly. "Stay. Please stay." That night, Julia discovered that marriage could be different than what she had known. Tanner was patient and attentive, making sure she felt cherished rather than simply used. Afterward, as she lay in his arms in the darkness, she felt the first tender shoots of something deeper than respect taking root in her heart. The weeks that followed were among the happiest Julia had ever known. She and Tanner fell into the rhythms of married life with surprising ease. They worked side by side during the day and talked long into the night, learning each other's stories, dreams, and fears. The twins bloomed under Tanner's attention, calling him Papa within the first month and shadowing him whenever possible. "They adore you," Julia told him one afternoon as they watched the boys help Pete muck out stalls with more enthusiasm than skill. "The feeling is mutual." Tanner slipped an arm around her waist. "I never knew how much I wanted children until I had them." "Do you want more?" "Children of our own, I mean. Not that the twins are not yours now, but I know what you mean." He turned her to face him, his expression serious. "I would love to have more children with you, Julia, but only when you are ready. There is no rush." But Julia found she was ready sooner than expected. Maybe it was the security of her new life, or maybe it was the love she felt growing stronger each day. 2 months after their wedding, she began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited another month to be certain before telling Tanner. She chose a quiet evening when the boys were already asleep and they were alone in their bedroom. "I have something to tell you." Tanner looked up from the ranch ledger he had been reviewing. "You look serious. Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong. Quite the opposite, actually." She took a deep breath. "I am with child. The baby should come in late spring." The ledger hit the floor with a thud. Tanner stared at her, his face cycling through shock, disbelief, and finally pure joy. Then he was on his feet, sweeping her into his arms and spinning her around. "Careful." She protested, laughing. "I am delicate now. You are the strongest woman I know." He set her down gently but kept his arms around her. "A baby, our baby. Julia, I cannot believe it. Are you happy?" "Happy. I am beyond happy. I am." He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her deeply. "Thank you. Thank you for this gift." That winter was harsh, with snow piling high around the ranch buildings and temperatures dropping well below freezing. But inside the main house, warmth and love kept the cold at bay. The twins were thrilled to learn they would have a baby brother or sister, and they helped Julia knit tiny blankets and gowns. Tanner became almost comically protective, insisting she rest frequently and refusing to let her lift anything heavier than a wooden spoon. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she protested when he carried her across an icy patch in the yard rather than let her walk. "Humor me," he said, setting her down carefully inside the barn. "You are carrying my child. I will take no chances." Lynn found their antics endlessly entertaining. "He is worse than any expectant mother I have ever seen. You would think no woman had ever had a baby before." But Julia secretly loved Tanner's attentiveness. She had been alone through her pregnancy with the twins, with Robert too busy with his own concerns to notice her discomfort or fears. Having a husband who cared about every detail of her well-being was a precious gift. As her belly grew round with new life, Julia found herself falling deeper in love with her husband. It was in the small things. How he rubbed her swollen feet each evening, the way he talked to the baby through her belly, his excitement over every kick and movement. But it was also in the larger gestures. His absolute commitment to their family, his integrity in all his dealings, his tenderness with her and the boys. One snowy evening in February, they lay in bed together, Julia's back against Tanner's chest and his hand spread protectively over her pregnant belly. The baby was active, tumbling and kicking beneath his palm. "I love you," Julia said quietly. She had never said the words to him before, had been too afraid of not hearing them returned. Tanner went very still behind her. Then he gently turned her to face him, his gray eyes searching hers in the lamplight. "Say that again." "I love you, Tanner." "I think I have for a while now, but I was afraid to say it." "Why afraid?" "Because this started as a practical arrangement, and I did not want to burden you with feelings you might not share." Tanner took her face in both hands, his expression intense. "Julia Calloway, I have loved you since the day you stood in my yard looking like a fierce angel defending her children. Every day since has only made me love you more. I did not say it before because I wanted to give you time, did not want you to feel pressured. But I love you with everything in me. You and the boys and this baby we made together, you are my whole world." Julia felt tears streaming down her face as she kissed him. "I was so afraid I would never feel this way about anyone, that I was not capable of this kind of love. You are capable of everything good in this world. You are the bravest, strongest, most loving woman I have ever known." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "And you are mine as I am yours for the rest of our lives." Spring came late to Nebraska that year, but when it finally arrived, it brought an explosion of new life. The prairie grasses turned green, wildflowers bloomed in riot of color, and calves wobbled on new legs in the pastures. On a warm May evening, Julia went into labor. Lynn and the midwife from town attended her, while Tanner paced the kitchen with the twins, trying to keep them calm and himself from breaking down the bedroom door. The labor was long and difficult, and more than once Tanner considered doing just that. But finally, as the sun was setting in a blaze of orange glory, a baby's cry rang through the house. Lynn emerged from the bedroom, her face wreathed in smiles. "You have a daughter, Tanner, a beautiful, healthy daughter, and Julia did wonderfully." Tanner sagged with relief. "She is all right." "Truly all right. Tired but fine. Give us a few more minutes to get her settled, then you can come in." When Tanner finally entered the bedroom, he found Julia propped against pillows, looking exhausted but radiant. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the blankets she had knitted. He approached slowly, almost afraid this moment was too perfect to be real. "Come meet your daughter," Julia said softly. Tanner sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at the baby. She had a shock of dark hair and Julia's delicate features. Even as he watched, she opened her eyes, revealing a blue-gray color that might eventually turn to match his own. "She is perfect," he whispered. "What should we name her?" "I was thinking Rose. Rose Catherine, after your mother." Tanner felt his throat close with emotion. "My mother would be honored. Rose Catherine Calloway." He touched one tiny hand with his finger, and the baby immediately gripped it with surprising strength. "Welcome to the world, little Rose. Your mama and I and your brothers have been waiting for you." The twins were allowed in next, awed and quiet as they peered at their new sister. Samuel touched her soft hair with one gentle finger. "She is so small." "You were both this small once," Julia told them, "but Rose will grow and you will help teach her everything she needs to know." "We will be the best big brothers ever," Thomas declared solemnly. Life settled into a new rhythm with baby Rose. The household revolved around her feeding and sleeping schedule for the first months. Tanner proved to be a devoted father, walking the floor with her during colicky evenings and changing nappies without complaint. The twins were equally besotted, competing for the privilege of holding her or making her smile. Julia had never been happier. On good days, she could barely remember the desperate, frightened woman who had arrived in Red Cloud with nothing but hope and determination. That woman felt like someone from another lifetime. One afternoon in late summer, she was working in the kitchen garden with Rose sleeping in a basket nearby when Tanner rode up. He dismounted and came to where she knelt among the tomato plants. "I have been thinking," he said without preamble. "About what?" Julia sat back on her heels, shading her eyes to look up at him. "About how we started. You arrived here with nothing, desperate and alone. I offered you a practical arrangement." Julia felt a flutter of unease. "Yes. That is not what we have anymore, Julia. What we have now is so much more than I ever imagined was possible. You are not my housekeeper or even just my wife. You are my partner, my best friend, the love of my life. I wanted to make sure you know that." The unease melted into warmth. "I do know that. Just as you must know how much you mean to me. I do. But I wanted to say it out loud. I wanted to make sure you never doubted, not for a single moment, how precious you are to me." He knelt beside her in the dirt, taking her earth-stained hands in his. "I thank God every day for the stagecoach that brought you to Red Cloud, for the courage that made you walk miles in the heat to find work, for the trust you showed in accepting my proposal. You saved me just as much as I saved you, Julia." She leaned forward and kissed him, tasting dust and love and gratitude. "We saved each other." Rose began to fuss in her basket, and Tanner scooped her up, holding her against his chest with the practiced ease of an experienced father. "And now we have this perfect little person and those two boys who make every day an adventure. We have built something real and lasting, you and I." "We have," Julia agreed, standing and brushing dirt from her skirts. "A family, a home, a love I never thought I would find." The years that followed brought both challenges and joys. There were hard winters when they worried about losing cattle, and summers when drought threatened the crops. But through it all, Julia and Tanner faced everything together, their love deepening with each shared struggle and triumph. The twins grew tall and strong, learning ranching from Tanner and developing into fine young men who worked the land with pride. Rose blossomed into a bright, spirited girl who could ride almost before she could walk, and had both her parents wrapped around her little finger. When Rose was 3, Julia gave birth to twin boys, naming them Jacob and John. Tanner joked that his house was becoming overrun with children, but his eyes shone with pride every time he said it. 2 years later came another daughter, Emma. And then finally, when Julia was 30 and certain their family was complete, a surprise baby boy they named after Tanner's father, William. The ranch prospered under Tanner's careful management and Julia's partnership. They expanded their holdings, built a larger house to accommodate their growing family, and became pillars of the Red Cloud community. But success never changed the foundation of their relationship, the deep love and respect they held for each other. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Tanner took Julia to the spot where she had first arrived at the ranch, that dusty yard where she had stood with 2 frightened boys and asked for work. "You remember standing right here?" he asked, his arm around her waist. "How could I forget?" I was terrified and trying so hard not to show it. I took one look at you and knew my life was about to change. I did not know how much or how wonderful it would be, but I knew. I thought you were going to turn us away. When you asked my age and about my husband, I was certain you would say no. I could never have turned you away. You were the bravest thing I had ever seen. He turned her to face him. "I told you once that I thought we could build something good together." I had no idea how much of an understatement that was. What we have built, Julia, it exceeds my wildest dreams. Mine, too. She thought of that desperate widow with 17 cents and the woman she had become. "I arrived here with nothing but my children and hope. You gave me everything, Tanner. A home, security, more children, and most importantly, a love I never thought existed. We gave each other everything," he corrected. "I was just a man with a ranch and empty rooms before you. You filled my life with warmth and laughter and purpose. You made me a husband and a father. You made me complete." As the sun set over the land they had built together, Julia leaned against her husband and watched their children playing in the yard. Samuel and Thomas, now 14, were teaching 6-year-old Jacob and John how to rope fence posts. Rose was helping 8-year-old Emma pick wildflowers, while baby William toddled between them on chubby legs. "They need a father anyway," you said, Julia recalled with a soft laugh. "That first day when I asked about work, you looked at the boys and said something about them needing a father." "Did I? I do not remember the exact words, only the feeling of rightness, like pieces falling into place. You were right. They did need a father. We all needed you. And I needed all of you more than I knew." Tanner kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy with a practical proposal. Thank you for seeing past a desperate widow to the possibility of us." From the yard, Rose's voice called out, "Mama, Papa, come see what we found." Hand in hand, Julia and Tanner walked toward their children, toward the life they had built together from nothing but hope and hard work, and a love that had grown from a seed of respect into something magnificent and enduring. The wild Nebraska wind carried the sound of children's laughter across the prairie, the same wind that had blown a desperate widow to this place all those years ago. But now that wind felt like a blessing rather than a hardship, carrying with it the promise of all the years still to come. Julia sometimes thought about that terrified woman stepping off the stagecoach with nothing but her children and 17 cents. She wished she could go back and tell her younger self that everything would be all right, better than all right. That the handsome cowboy who offered her work would become the love of her life. That the twins would gain not just a father, but brothers and sisters. That the desperate hope she carried would bloom into more happiness than she ever imagined possible. But perhaps not knowing had been part of the journey. Perhaps she needed to walk through that fear and uncertainty to truly appreciate the joy waiting on the other side. As they reached the children and Rose excitedly showed them a nest of baby rabbits she had discovered, Julia caught Tanner's eye over their daughter's head. The look they shared spoke of everything they had been through together and everything still to come. It was a look of partnership, of passion, of the deep, abiding love that had surprised them both. That night, after all 6 children were finally asleep and the house was quiet, Julia and Tanner sat together on the porch watching the stars emerge. The same stars that had looked down on a desperate widow and a lonely rancher, not knowing they were about to become something more together. "Happy?" Tanner asked, pulling her close. "Happier than I have words to express." Julia tilted her face up for his kiss. "You know what the best part is?" "What is that?" "We still have so many years ahead of us, so many more memories to make." "We do indeed." Tanner's arms tightened around her, and I plan to spend every single one of them loving you more than the day before." "That is a very ambitious plan, Mr. Calloway." "I am an ambitious man, Mrs. Calloway." They sat in comfortable silence, wrapped in each other's arms as the night deepened around them. Inside the house, their children slept peacefully. Around them, the ranch they had built together stood strong and prosperous. Above them, the stars wheeled in their eternal dance. Julia thought about the old man at the trading post who had given her water and directions when she had nothing. She thought about Lynn, who had welcomed her with warmth and wisdom. She thought about Pete and the ranch hands who had accepted her children without question. But mostly she thought about Tanner, the cowboy who had looked at a widow with twins and seen not a burden but a possibility. "What are you thinking about?" Tanner murmured against her hair. "About how one decision can change everything. If I had not gotten on that stagecoach, if I had not walked to your ranch, if I had not said yes to your proposal, none of this would exist. But you did all those things. You were brave enough to take the chances. We both were." "We both were," he agreed. "And look what we built with that bravery." They sat together until the moon rose, painting the prairie in silver light. Eventually, Tanner stood and pulled Julia to her feet, leading her inside to the bedroom they shared. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and joys, as every day did on a working ranch. But tonight was for them, for the love they had built and continued to build every day. As Julia drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, she sent a silent prayer of thanks to whatever fate or fortune had brought her to Red Cloud. She had arrived with nothing but her children and hope, and she had found everything her heart had ever wanted but never dared to dream she could have. The morning sun rose over the Double C Ranch, bringing with it another day in the life Julia and Tanner had created together. The children woke with the dawn, their voices and laughter filling the house. Breakfast was the usual controlled chaos with 6 children of various ages competing for attention. "Papa, can we check the rabbit nest again today?" Rose asked around a mouthful of pancakes. "After your lessons with your mother," Tanner replied, ruffling her dark hair. "And chew your food properly." "Samuel and I want to help with the branding today," Thomas announced. "We are old enough now." Tanner exchanged a look with Julia, who nodded slightly. Their oldest boys were indeed old enough to take on more responsibility. "All right. But you follow Pete's instructions exactly. No showing off." The twins grinned at each other, thrilled to be trusted with this more adult task. After breakfast, while Tanner headed out with the boys, Julia gathered Rose and the younger children for their morning lessons. She had insisted all her children learn to read and write properly, and Tanner supported this wholeheartedly. Emma was proving to have a quick mind for numbers, while little William was still mastering his letters. Lynn, now in her 80s but still spry, helped watch the youngest while Julia taught. The older woman had become like a grandmother to the children, and they adored her. She told them stories of China, and taught them phrases in her native language, enriching their understanding of the wider world beyond their Nebraska ranch. Around midday, Julia was hanging laundry when she saw a familiar stagecoach approaching. Visitors were rare this far from town, and her curiosity was piqued. The coach stopped in the yard, and a well-dressed woman emerged, looking around uncertainly. Julia wiped her hands on her apron and walked over. "Can I help you?" The woman smiled, though it did not quite reach her eyes. "I am looking for the Calloway Ranch. I was told this is the place." "It is. I am Julia Calloway. Are you lost?" "No, I came specifically to see you. My name is Margaret Winters. I am from the Children's Aid Society in Pennsylvania." Julia's heart skipped with sudden fear. What is this about? "May we speak somewhere private?" They went into the parlor, and Julia sat stiffly on the edge of a chair while Mrs. Winters settled herself more comfortably. Mrs. Calloway, I am here regarding Samuel and Thomas Dawson. I have been investigating their current living situation. On whose authority? Julia's voice came out sharper than intended. Your late husband's sister contacted our organization. She claims you took the children west against family wishes and that their welfare may be at risk. Julia felt ice forming in her veins. Robert's sister Helen had always been a bitter woman, angry that Julia had received any inheritance at all. I am their mother. I have every right to take my children wherever I see fit, and they are not at risk. They are healthy, happy, and well cared for. I can see they appear healthy, Mrs. Winters conceded. But Mrs. Dawson, you must understand our concern. You arrived in Nebraska with no resources, took employment as a servant, and then married your employer mere weeks later. There are questions about the propriety of such arrangements and whether the children are in a proper moral environment. How dare you? Julia stood, trembling with rage. I did what I had to do to survive and protect my children. Mr. Calloway offered us security and has been a wonderful father to the boys. There is nothing improper about our marriage or our home. At that moment, Tanner came through the door with Samuel and Thomas, all three dusty and sweaty from the morning's work. He took in the scene immediately, his expression hardening as he looked from Julia's angry face to the strange woman in their parlor. What is going on here? Tanner, this is Mrs. Winters from the Children's Aid Society. Robert's sister has apparently decided to make trouble. Tanner's jaw clenched, but he kept his voice level. Boys, go wash up and help Lynn with lunch. After Samuel and Thomas left, though Julia could see the worry on their faces, Tanner stood beside Julia, his hand finding hers. Mrs. Winters, I am Tanner Calloway. These are my sons you are discussing, and I take exception to anyone questioning their welfare or their mother's character. Mr. Calloway, I am simply doing my job. I must verify that the children are in a safe and appropriate environment. Then verify it, Tanner said flatly. Look around. Talk to our ranch hands, our neighbors, the people in town. You will find that my sons are thriving. They attend lessons daily, they are learning valuable skills, they are well fed and well clothed, and most importantly, they are loved, by both their mother and by me. Mrs. Winters looked between them, and some of the official coldness in her expression softened. I can see the children appear well cared for, but I will need to speak with them privately and with others in the community before I can file my report. Fine, Julia said tightly, but do not upset them. They have been through enough in their young lives without being interrogated. Over the next 2 days, Mrs. Winters conducted her investigation. She spoke with Samuel and Thomas separately and together. She interviewed Lynn and Pete and several of the other ranch hands. She went into town and talked with the schoolteacher, the reverend, and various townspeople who knew the Calloway family. Julia was a bundle of nerves the entire time, barely sleeping and unable to eat. The thought of losing her boys was unbearable. Tanner was a steady presence, refusing to let her spiral into panic. They cannot take our sons, he said firmly on the second night. We have done nothing wrong. Anyone with eyes can see how happy and healthy they are. But what if that is not enough? What if Helen has influence or money to sway the decision? Then we will fight. I will hire the best lawyers. I will go to Pennsylvania myself if I have to. No one is taking our children, Julia. I promise you that. On the third morning, Mrs. Winters requested a meeting with both Julia and Tanner. They sat in the parlor again, Julia's hand gripping Tanner's so hard her knuckles were white. Mrs. Winters opened her folder of notes and looked at them both. I have completed my investigation. What I found is a family that is, by any measure, thriving. The boys speak glowingly of both of you. They are receiving an education, learning practical skills, and are clearly happy and secure. Your neighbors and community members uniformly praise your family. Even your employees speak highly of your character and parenting. Julia felt tears threatening but held them back. So what will you report? I will report that Samuel and Thomas Dawson Calloway are in an exemplary home environment and that there is no cause for concern regarding their welfare. In fact, I will recommend that no further investigation is warranted and that Mrs. Helen Dawson's claims are unfounded. The relief was so overwhelming that Julia actually swayed in her seat. Tanner's arm came around her, steadying her. "Thank you," he said hoarsely. Mrs. Winters smiled, and this time it was genuine. "Thank you for allowing me to witness what a real family looks like. In my work, I see many situations that are genuinely troubling. It is refreshing to find one that is so clearly full of love. Your children are blessed to have you both." After Mrs. Winters departed on the afternoon stage, Julia stood in the yard watching the dust settle in the coach's wake. Tanner came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "It is over," he murmured. "They cannot threaten our family any more." Julia leaned back against him. "I was so afraid. The thought of losing them, of someone saying I was not a good enough mother." "You are an incredible mother. Anyone who spends 5 minutes with our children can see that." He turned her to face him. "Helen cannot hurt us, Julia. We are a legal family, and the boys are mine in every way that matters. Even if she tried again, she would have no grounds. I know. I just cannot help remembering how powerless I felt when Robert died, how I had no control over anything. You are not that woman anymore. You are stronger now, and you are not alone. You have me, and I will always fight for our family." That evening, they gathered all the children and explained in age-appropriate terms what had happened. Samuel and Thomas, who had been worried since Mrs. Winters' arrival, needed reassurance that they would not be taken away. "You are my sons," Tanner told them firmly. "Legally, morally, and in my heart. No one can change that. Your Aunt Helen may have been confused about your situation, but now she knows you are exactly where you belong." "We do not want to leave," Samuel said, his voice shaking slightly. "This is our home." "And it always will be," Julia promised, gathering both boys into her arms even though they were getting too big for such embraces. "We are a family. Nothing can break that." Rose, who understood more than her younger siblings, declared, "If anyone tries to take my brothers, I will chase them off with Papa's shotgun." Despite the tension, everyone laughed at her fierce declaration. Tanner scooped her up. "I appreciate the loyalty, but I think we can handle family matters without firearms." The incident, while stressful, ultimately strengthened their family bonds. The older boys, having faced the possibility of being separated, became even more devoted to their parents and siblings. Julia and Tanner, having weathered this challenge together, found their partnership deepened further. As the years continued to pass, the Calloway Ranch became known throughout the region as a model of success and family values. Tanner's careful management and Julia's partnership made them prosperous. They were fair employers, good neighbors, and active in their community. When Samuel and Thomas turned 18, Tanner deeded them each a portion of the ranch land, making them partners in the operation. Both young men had grown into the work, and their contributions were valuable. They began to talk about building their own houses on their land, about courting young women and starting families of their own. "I am not ready for them to grow up," Julia confessed to Tanner one night. "I know it is silly, but they are my babies. They will always be your babies, even when they are old men with grandchildren of their own." Tanner pulled her close. "But we have done our job well. We raised them to be good men who can stand on their own feet." "That is what parents are supposed to do. I know. It just happened so fast. We still have Rose and the others to raise. And who knows, maybe Samuel and Thomas will give us grandchildren soon. Think of that, spoiling grandbabies and sending them home when they get fussy. Julia laughed despite her emotions. You make a good point. Rose, at 15, was becoming a beautiful young woman with her mother's grace and her father's determination. She had declared her intention to run the ranch herself someday, scandalizing some of the more traditional neighbors but making her parents proud. The younger children were growing too, each developing their own personalities and dreams. On Julia's 35th birthday, Tanner surprised her with a trip to Omaha. It was the first time they had left the ranch for more than a day since their wedding, and Lynn and the older children assured them they could manage for a week. I want to give you something special, Tanner said as they boarded the train. Something that is just for you, not for the family or the ranch. Omaha was larger and more cosmopolitan than anything Julia had experienced. Tanner took her to nice restaurants, bought her beautiful dresses, and treated her to a show at the theater. But the best part was simply having time alone together, remembering what it was like before their lives revolved around children and cattle. On their last evening, as they sat in their hotel room watching the city lights, Julia felt overwhelmed with gratitude for the life she had built. Do you ever think about how different things could have been if I had never come to Red Cloud, if you had not offered me work? Sometimes, Tanner admitted. I think about that lonely man I was, working myself to exhaustion to avoid going home to an empty house. I think about how I might have lived my whole life like that, never knowing what I was missing. I think about that frightened widow with nothing but hope. How close I came to complete despair. We found each other just in time. Tanner took her hand. Or maybe the timing was always perfect. Everything we went through, separately and together, led us to this moment, and I would not change any of it because it brought us here. Neither would I. Julia leaned her head on his shoulder. Even the hard parts, even the fear and uncertainty, it was all worth it for this. They returned to the ranch refreshed and even more appreciative of their life together. The children mobbed them upon arrival, all talking at once about everything that had happened during their absence. The house was chaotic and noisy and perfect. As more years passed, the Calloway family continued to grow and evolve. Samuel married a sweet-natured girl from town named Mary, and Thomas fell in love with a widow with a young son, creating his own version of his parents' story. Rose did indeed take over much of the ranch management, proving to be as skilled as any of her brothers. The younger children grew and found their own paths. Julia and Tanner aged together, their hair graying and faces weathering, but their love only growing stronger. They became grandparents multiple times over, their house often filled with the chaos of visiting grandchildren. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a massive celebration. All 6 of their children were there with spouses and children of their own. Friends and neighbors came from miles around. As Julia looked out over the crowd of people who had sprung from that single desperate decision to get on a stagecoach, she felt almost overwhelmed. "What are you thinking?" Tanner asked, coming up beside her with 2 glasses of punch. "I am thinking about that day I arrived here. How terrified I was, how I thought all I was asking for was work to keep my children fed. And instead you got a whole life. We both did." She took the glass and touched it to his. "To us. To 25 years of building something beautiful together. To us," Tanner echoed. "And to the next 25 years. They drank, and then Tanner set aside his glass and pulled Julia into his arms. Someone had brought a fiddle, and music was starting up. Just like on their wedding night, he swept her around in a waltz while their children and grandchildren watched and smiled. "I love you, Julia Calloway," Tanner said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "More than the day I married you, more than yesterday, more than I can say." "I love you too," Julia replied. "Thank you for seeing me that day, for seeing past the desperate widow to the woman I could become. You were always that woman. You just needed the chance to bloom." As the party continued around them, Julia rested her head against Tanner's chest and let herself be held. She thought about all the moments that had led them here. The grief and the joy, the struggles and the triumphs, the quiet mornings and the chaotic evenings. Every single one had been worth it. The Wild West had been tamed somewhat by progress and civilization, but Red Cloud, Nebraska, remained a place where hard work and determination could still build something lasting, where a widow with nothing could become the matriarch of a thriving family, where a lonely cowboy could find love and purpose. As the sun set over the prairie, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson, Julia looked up at her husband and smiled. They had built this together, this life full of love and laughter and the sweet satisfaction of work well done. And they still had years ahead of them, years to continue the story they had started that dusty day when she had asked for work, and he had seen the possibility of so much more. The music played on, and the Calloway family celebrated late into the night. Children chased each other through the yard, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Adults swapped stories and shared food. And at the center of it all, Julia and Tanner stood together, their hands clasped, their hearts full, their future bright with promise. They had started with nothing but need and hope. They had built an empire of love. And every day forward would be another page in the story they continued to write together. The Wild West romance that had surprised them both with its depth and beauty and enduring strength. This was their happily ever after, earned through courage and faith and the willingness to take a chance on each other. And it was more wonderful than either of them had ever dared to dream.